Hello, my lovely listeners and viewers. Today we have someone special, Jeremiah. And we also have a very special setting, which means if you see me looking at Jeremiah, it's because he's actually in the room with me. I can touch him. So, Jeremiah was the nice friend that shared with me the notes, the music notes. If you guys remember the episode for the listeners, the regular listeners, anybody who's new, on the Inspiring Human Potential podcast, we have an episode where I share about music and the notes of music and how they can uplift us. And so the emotions that each note remind us about. Do you remember a little bit about those notes, if you can, before you introduce yourself?
Basics. Sure.
The different emotions.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit?
The different emotions. So, in general, it's going to be a major scale will be more positive emotions, and minor scales will translate to more negative emotions. Is the gist of it.
Okay, so if you guys remember, I read through the whole list, but this is Jeremiah. He's my friend, and today we're going to talk a little bit about aspects of being yourself. He's also in the process of still answering the inspirational Be Yourself questionnaire, but in the meantime, he has something interesting to share for the listeners that think about being yourself in more than just one way, like improving yourself. And he's also going to share with us a little bit about how Tai Chi, boxing, and music have supported him along his journey. So before we begin, Jeremiah, is there anything you'd like to share with the listeners? Introduce yourself a little bit.
As you said, I'm Jeremiah. As far as work goes, I've always enjoyed fixing things, so most of my life has been dedicated to fixing machinery, and now I'm going into boxing and I want to do coaching, so I'm trying to get my coaching license, and I'm going to be trying to help teenagers mostly who just need a little bit of encouragement and emotional fixing, if you will.
A little bit more than a little bit. Let me see. How did you get thinking about boxing and teenagers and helping in a way to coach?
It had a big impact in my life. I was very uncomfortable with myself. Didn't have very good self-esteem. Didn't think highly of myself, and boxing and Tai Chi helped massively with that. It was a good tool to introduce myself into how to get a handle on my emotions and improve.
So you think of improvement and fixing, which brings me to when we talked about being yourself and we looked a little bit at some notes. Remember how for you it's about being bettering yourself, I think it was?
Yes.
So you said the fixing part and the self-esteem part. And can you share with the listeners a little bit about that and viewers?
Yeah, so for me, it's become more of I think of myself today as a new, different person, the potential anyway, to be a new, different person than I was yesterday. So my goal isn't to just be myself in such a simple way of thinking about it every day. I want to be better than I was yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so then this goes back into boxing and Tai Chi, which is all about improvement and mastering yourself. And so every day is just a little bit better than I was yesterday.
And how old were you when you began Tai Chi and then boxing?
Let's see, Tai Chi, I began doing that about 17, 18 years old. Dabbled in boxing around the same time, but I was really more focused on the Tai Chi at the time because I had a lot of self-esteem and anger issues, and Tai Chi was very helpful with that. I moved on to boxing later on, around 24.
Yes.
Until now.
And self-esteem and anger. We talked about these two very important emotions. So how did Tai Chi help you? Because I haven't done the episode where I actually utilize a journal note that you shared with me about breathing.
Yes.
So can you walk us through that aspect? Self-esteem, anger with Tai Chi.
Yeah, so the Tai Chi helped mainly with anger, and breathing was the most important part of it. And I found that controlling your breath really translated into a mastery of myself in pretty much every way, especially with anger though. So when I started getting angry or my emotions got too bottled up or too heavy and I started lashing out, at other people in the world, you calm and you breathe slowly, deeply, and focus my mind only on my breath. So it's not just I'm sitting there breathing.
Yeah.
I'm focusing my mind only on the feeling of the air coming into my lungs, how it feels to come out, and doing that over and over and over, and it put me at peace.
Yeah. Well, the listeners and viewers know when we talk about the body element, our nervous system, our human nervous system is regulated with breathing. And so when it comes to Tai Chi and yoga, as we discuss a lot of times, this is where that breathing, it is regulating our system. Although I would say because it's an art, there's much more behind it, right? Because when you're breathing, they even teach you about breathing in a way that is telling you to master your body, correct?
Right. So with Tai Chi specifically, I would start kind of standing still, but it's always going to incorporate movement to go with the breathing. So I would breathe in and my arms would come up, and as I go out, my arms would come down and swing out, and I have to move the joints in fluidity. Yeah. But it all goes down to my breathing. So if I'm not focusing properly on my breathing, then my body will not follow suit.
Oh, okay. And how is that when you began? How would that affect you? If that makes
well,
sense.
when I began, I wasn't actually very good at it.
Okay. Would you get frustrated, or would they?
Yes, very frustrated. But my teacher at the time was very helpful in that. I would almost seem to absorb his demeanor out of it. He just kind of being around him, and he seemed so at peace and so in control that it almost gave me a better way to control myself, because it was almost reassuring.
Did he also support you with life, or was he only focused on helping you to get comfortable with your body and breathing?
He was really focused on that, but he was a very nice guy, and I believe that he does the Tai Chi and that kind of teaching because he knows that it will help in everyday life in general, and I know that it's helped him.
And when it comes to you coaching, for example, you went from Tai Chi to starting to learn about boxing.
Mm-hmm.
When did you begin that path, and why are you, for example, a lot more focused? Is it on boxing with the coaching versus Tai Chi? Yes, I'd like to know why one over the other.
Well, they're not as different as you would think, as far as the martial art aspect of it goes, and I just happen to also really love the sport of boxing. It's fun. It's a much more fun element to me than Tai Chi. It can be a long, boring process in a way to most people to learn Tai Chi.
Yeah. So as a teenager, staying still is not that easy.
They're going to be much more interested because they're going to think, "Ooh, yes, I want to punch things."
Okay. And so how old are you when you started learning and integrating boxing, and who suggested it, or how did it come to?
I was about 24.
Okay.
And it wasn't much of an outside suggestion, really. I've always been interested in martial arts. Mm-hmm. I really nerd out on it. So, and I've also helped me with those anger issues. Tai Chi helped a lot with my self-mastery and calming myself down, but I would still bottle up a lot of anger a lot. Okay. So it started out as just I wanted to hit a punching bag and let it out.
Yeah.
And I realized that just kind of letting it out for me helped. Having that coupled along with the breathing exercises, but then still being able to get some frustration out really was very helpful. So I started getting into boxing that way and put a big focus on it. And then I happened to, because I nerd out on all this, I know a lot of people from a lot of different combat sports. And so I know a lot of boxers. And they were always more than willing to, hey, come down to my gym and let's work out and have some fun together.
And the self-esteem part. So you learned how with your body and with these different sports, I can call them sports, right?
Yes,
you can work with the energy. So the boxing, the expression and the release of energy, right? Anger, particularly frustration. Tai Chi is mastery. How did the self-esteem improve on your own? How did you do that?
So I think a big thing to play was the sport aspect of it, so the competition part. And once I started seeing results from my work, I started to believe in myself more and become much more comfortable with just being myself, because I knew that I knew that I would get somewhere by being myself and being in touch with my emotions and my physical body and putting them together, and I wasn't ashamed of it anymore because I saw good things happening because of it.
Did it give you any feelings of relief? Were there any contemplations that went into new directions as well in regards to self-esteem, or do you still face similar doubts? So did you see like a scale, moving forward?
Yes, I do still face similar thoughts at times. It's
That's
something
normal.
that always
Yes.
kind of haunts me
I'd
a
say
little
all
bit.
of us have insecurities.
But
yeah.
it's become easier, much easier, and it's not as big of a problem as in depth as it was. So and I know when I do have these kind of feelings and thoughts, I'm able now to breathe, work out. I can work the bag a little bit, and I'm kind of put into this mental zone of I'm not thinking about anything else at the time.
Yes.
And then so I can almost release all of that negative emotion while I'm doing this, and then so when I'm done, it's just kind of gone. I don't feel insecure or bad about myself or doubting or anything anymore. It just kind of goes away.
Okay, it's a way to process those emotions and let them out. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And the confidence. When you see working with teenagers, for example, because it came to mind, how do you see that playing out for you? Because you've mentioned coaching. Is it going to be focused on the sport like you experienced, or do you think you would help on other areas?
I'm gonna go more closely towards what my own experience was, and I'm hoping that it can help other people, of course. But it was the results to me. So that's where the sport and the competition comes in. You go in every day and you put hard work in for 6 months, a year, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you get a great result out of it, and there's a feeling of such massive pride when all your hard work translates into something that has meaning, and your people around you are proud of you. The people that you work with are proud of you. Your coaches are proud of you, and you feel just that big, overwhelming feeling of pride that for me, I had never felt for a long time growing up. I hadn't felt anything like that.
Yeah.
So it had such a big importance to me.
If we talk a little bit about your transition from child, teenage, or you've mentioned people being an important part of your life. So sports helped you to gain confidence with your physiology as a male who has the anger, the self-esteem, and other issues, but also people. How did that impact? As you began Tai Chi and the people you're around, how did you notice yourself change and go through transformation, I suppose?
The people around me had a big impact, for sure. For a very long time, I didn't have a whole lot of encouragement, especially when it came to emotional aspect of life. I was encouraged to bottle it in. Don't be weak. It was seen as a weakness. Love and caring and all that. Don't do that. It was seen as a weakness.
Stereotypes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And I was surrounded by these kind of people, and so that's what I knew, and that's what I felt, and it bottled up all this horrible negativity in there, and that's just what I thought I should be.
Okay.
I would kind of keep myself from being myself.
Yeah.
And then so Tai Chi was a great group of people, very understanding and loving and caring people, and boxing too. Any martial art really. I've never. People who end up with that kind of mastery over themselves tend to be very nice, kind people.
Yes. They work with themselves, right? Their emotions, and I assume they.
But even then, I still had problems because my general friends that I was hanging out with, and I would go party, and they were still these nasty, negative, selfish, rough and tumble people, and it took me a long time to get out of that. And really, what it took was I moved. I moved to a different city, and I just didn't contact these old friends anymore. I just kind of chucked them out of my life, and I got new friends that were just better, kinder people.
Did you do it on your own, or was there like something that was calling you to leave?
Yeah, I was really unhappy. That's what called me to leave.
You're really unhappy. So when you realized the unhappiness, though, did you think the people had anything to do with it? just
I
questioning
didn't
them?
honestly hit me and realize it until I started hanging out with the better people.
Yes.
It was such a normal thing to me. That's what it was. And so when I finally left and got into this new city and got new friends, it was really eye opening. It was my first experience of, oh, well, this is a completely different way of life, and no one's judging me for these kind of things. I can have emotional conversations with my close friends, and they're not going to tell me to get over it. They'll actually just talk with me and support me through it and help.
So, and did you realize one was more effective and better than the other? Like, did you realize, not, I don't want to use the word toxic, but there are people that have relationships that aren't supportive. And so, how, when you realized that, I suppose, what did you have any thoughts about that part of your life?
Uh, I felt almost a regret in a way, because I felt like maybe it had been a little wasteful. Like I had spent all this time
with those individuals.
Yes.
Yes.
But I also found the value in what I've learned from it, and to have that experience and that contrasting experience. So I know what it's like to feel that way and live that way and be that way, which makes doing the opposite just so much more enjoyable.
And there's a difference, I would agree, meaning there are people that I definitely see in certain types of relationships, group settings, relationships, where they will do things to appease societal standards. And so while the group that obviously was previous to now wasn't helpful in any way, shape, or form, because not allowing you to express emotions is whether it be male or female stereotypes or any stereotype. Today we're talking always today in today's day and age about allowing freedom of emotional expression. But putting that aside, I mean, people in general, you see them with individuals that aren't supportive. So there's a definitely, I would say, a big difference if you're trying to be yourself. But it's interesting, like you said, I would agree. Anyone would think, wow, why did I spend that amount of time? How did I not see that those people were not supportive? But we go from teenagers. So right here, that teenage year, you and I talk a lot about the sense of self. And one of the things we haven't talked about yet was that reaction, right, to be yourself that you shared with me about your thinking, of course I'm myself, who else should I be? But also the part about the difference for you with being yourself and finding to be your honest, true self, I believe is the word.
Yeah, I found, to me, being myself was, especially when I was a lot younger and I didn't have a good opinion of myself. So someone said, told me to be myself, and well, I didn't like myself. So that wasn't as helpful as it sounded, I'm sure, in their heads.
Yes.
But what I've come to learn is that it's being honest with myself. So I'm not hiding who I am anymore. I'm not holding in these emotions I'm having. I'm finding ways to express them that are positive and useful. And by bottling everything in before, I was just lying to myself. And so being myself to me is just being honest with myself. And then you go that step further of bettering myself. So if I'm going to be honest, well, every day I would love to be a better version of myself, because of course I make mistakes and I still have, trouble with doubt and insecurities, just like everyone else in the world.
Yes, we all do. Exactly. And I was going to say, when you started being honest with yourself and presenting transparency with others, what were there any challenges that you found? And two, how did you feel in being able to finally remove the layer, a mask, or whatever we may call it? Because, right, being your honest self with others feels, well, different, I see.
Sure.
I asked. I'm not going to answer the
biggest
question.
challenge for me was at the start, when I was having these thoughts and ideas, like I want to be more honest and be my true self. Because before then, I would lie to myself, and therefore I'd be lying as to who I am to the rest of the world. So I wanted them to see me a certain way, not necessarily myself.
Yeah.
So at the start, it was difficult because I was a bitter, angry kid.
How old were you when you started, I guess, being your honest?
It was when I joined the Navy at age 17 was when I really got thrown into a situation where I kind of had to be more honest about who I was, because there was no there was no lying lying about it, and then when people catch you in those lies, I couldn't really run away from them anymore.
Yeah.
I was kind of stuck.
Now you have to take responsibility.
But ultimately, it was a great thing because it forced me to face that challenge. But then there's that challenge of, well, I was a bitter, angry man, and so being myself at that time was me releasing a lot of negativity. And imagine that, people didn't find me very likable at first.
So was it rude? Were you just
yes, I'd be rude and mean, but then there's still that element of my upbringing of be tough, don't show
That's
love.
Right.
So,
yes.
But I still had elements of that in there because it was just so ingrained.
So were you aware of this in a way that said, I don't want to do this anymore, or was it not?
I had that cognitive thought of, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live my life that way in that lie, but I wouldn't always notice it at the time when I was speaking to people, or I would be mean or angry about things. I was very impatient. So if someone wasn't, performing the way I thought they should, especially in a team environment, I was mean about it.
Yeah.
And it was only like after the fact that I would realize it, because they would have just as mean reactions, defensive reactions at me. And that's when I would have to be like,
oh, wait a minute.
They're yelling at me and they're angry. Well, how could I have done this differently? Maybe I shouldn't be so mean. But then eventually over time, it took a while, but over time, I just became less mean naturally.
Was there anyone or anything that prompted you to understand the empathy? Because you're growing empathy. You're realizing slowly, wait, my aggressive behavior, even though you're at least being honest, is creating this. So it was based on interactions, but how did you prompt yourself, I guess? Was it your inclination to not want that, or
it was
reading material?
My inclination to want to improve myself, but also my just general day-to-day life. So I would begin to take big notice of people's reactions to my behavior and my words. And so if they were reacting defensive or angry, or I wasn't, they would talk to me about hardships that they're having, and I would just kind of do what people had done to me in the past and just tell them, get over it, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So that kind of thing, right? But I would notice that those reactions, and it was more of that objective thought of, well, I have done the same thing. I get defensive and angry like that, and I know how that feels. And so I didn't want to because I know how that feels, and I started realizing that I was doing that to others. I started feeling, almost, it would make me almost feel bad about myself in that way of, well, now I feel like I'm the cause of someone else's pain and struggle, and I don't ever want to be the cause of that.
Yeah. So you grew a lot more sensitive to those feelings, both on yourself and others. And was Tai Chi and boxing playing any role as you're going through these experiences of learning how to talk to people while being honest?
I'd say yes, in the way that I became more masterful of my own mind and emotions through these martial arts. So I was able to realize where my mind was at the time, instead of realizing after the fact, after they had gotten angry or defensive at me. Now I could
in the moment I could gain back the me. Okay, got it. You guys get it. So in the moment, it's fascinating because you're applying that thinking brain to your emotions because of the mastery that you've gained with the breathing and the boxing. It really is important to pay attention to the body. So besides the people, so now you have two elements that you're looking at, and then there's the part of wanting to not hurt people's feelings, which you cared about, because some people may not gain that care just yet, even though your environment, I'm assuming. So for example, the Navy experience, I don't want you to necessarily go too much in depth because I know it's part of the inner growth, the inspirational Be Yourself story series, but that environment helped you to learn that you could rely on people, if I remember correctly, and how to treat people.
Team building was a huge part of that. Team building exercises, and really you have to count on the person next to you whether you like them or not. And that was very helpful. And in the same way that martial arts was helpful to me, because I started to gain self-control and self-awareness.
And what What else did you do with the self-control and self-awareness? You leave us hanging here, Jeremiah.
Oh man, well, you told me not to go too in depth.
Well, go a little bit more in depth. If there is anything else to add, I was looking at my notes because I'm forgetting some stuff here. But is there anything else? Yeah, to that. No.
I mean, I don't really. I'm sure there is. I just don't know quite how to describe it at the moment. Okay. Really, it was the team building was the biggest importance in that respect. Was learning how to rely on others, whether I liked them or not. It became. It didn't matter so much.
Yeah.
Because there was a goal and we were there to help each other, and I knew that we were there to help each other.
It allowed you to understand what it means to be able to entrust and be loved, even though it wasn't love, but be loved even if you're unlikable.
Yes.
And therefore that the body, because on the podcast I talk about the body element, and with the neuroscience, psychiatry information, this aspect, for example, for learning empathy, for people that don't have trust, because of attachment, the different attachment, there's for the attachment theory I've shared with you, there's different attachments. So there's secure, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. And so they explain how being able to experience a feeling like trust that you didn't feel before allows you to know something different, which is what gives you a sense of ease. And so even if it was forced, essentially it allowed your body to experience what it means to have trust, whether you liked each other or not.
Exactly. It definitely allowed me to find a way to respect people when before I had none.
Yes. And how about that respect part? Because you and I, a little bit, we differ when we talk about that, the societal importance and value. How does that help you with self-esteem, with the bettering of yourself?
Not entirely sure I understand the question, really.
Thanks to society structure, there are aspects that you look to when you're working, for example, relating to others, not being angry or aggressive. That's one aspect, right? And then conducting yourself appropriately, or even vocabulary. You've shared how you're looking to amplify your vocabulary because that way you avoid being misinterpreted. So society and interactions to you has value. That was where I was getting.
Yes.
So it has an impact on your journey.
Okay. Yes. Huge value, and communication is a huge part of that, because I found I can be very I'm trying to find the words. Man, not real good on that, expanding your vocabulary.
It's okay. However it is, I'll expand on it for you.
I would come across very tough and uncaring, even though I do care especially when I care.
Okay.
So, but I would come off very blunt, cold, stoic.
Like you didn't care.
Yes.
Like you don't
care.
I
don't care. I was like, and
care.
I would always cut to practical. I'm a big fan of pragmatism.
You're the fixer. You're the fixer.
I'm the fixer.
That's the thing.
So I would immediately cut to cold advice and that kind of thing, and people usually misinterpret me. So I've constantly over years tried to work on the ways to communicate better so that people understand my intent and meaning sooner rather than later. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time explaining myself. I don't want them to get defensive and angry, and then I have to backtrack and say, "Oh, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. That's not what I meant," and then I have to re-explain.
And guys, Jeremiah's only almost 31, and he says he's so you're so. He has no idea. I keep telling him it's a very good place where you're at. Caring the way you do is very beautiful, because the part of being cold, even though we've talked enough to know that part of fixing probably is what gives the idea that there's not the feelings, just because people, if they're upset in that moment, they don't want they're looking to be supported emotionally. So you providing them the solution, a majority is not looking for that. And so instinctively they can feel that it's you brushing off the emotions, that's all. But the fact that you care is what is indicative of what I like to call an empowered ego, because you actually have the ability to put aside your personal needs, your personal preference, your personal inclination of verbiage, of speakage. I know that might not be a word, but you're actually trying to bring something different to the table, because you realize people take it to heart. Like you realize that their feelings are hurt. and you care, and that for the age and for your journey, the struggles and everything, it's just I see older people that don't even do this. They don't realize it, and they claim there are leaders that don't do this, is what I'm trying to say. It's challenging to be, for me, around people and for a lot of people, but it's because of those expectations. However, once you're able to be aware of yourself, like you are showing even throughout all the answers and all the sharing that you're doing, it changes things. It becomes easier, even though you're still obviously challenged, because I mean, it's going to take a while before you find your perfect blend. Like, it's funny, you said you want to be brief. I don't mind expanding on something, but it's
Sure.
fascinating to see when you'll find your perfect match. How that
Right.
would be.
Well, I don't mind expanding and having lengthy conversations about things, but I don't want my intent to ever be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Especially early on, right?
Yeah.
Because the earlier that they misinterpret me and get defensive and angry, the shorter our conversation is.
Yeah.
There, you kind of eliminate the possibility for a conversation at that
Yes.
point.
Yes. Well,
So
and see
the
that
goal is to actually
where,
expand
yeah,
and talk and go in depth and for more lengthy amount of time, but you can't really do that when
somebody's getting defensive
Mhm.
or offended.
yes.
And that is still to be praised, if I may say that. And to the listeners, this is what it looks like when you're moving forward, because the reality is, again, it's not a hierarchy, but many people do not recognize other people's feelings as they're interacting with each other. And as, again, my listeners, the followers, they know there's few people that I've met along my journey so far that are that empowered. And I use the word empowered because to have the ability to know you and then to realize what's happening is empowerment. Otherwise, you'd be reactive, which is not what you are. Even though you share that you may get somebody upset, you're not reacting. You're actually immediately trying to see, is there anything I can now do to rectify, I think is the right word, to fix the
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
And the effort you put in, ever, I don't know. You'll have to let us know if you'll ever achieve that place of not being misinterpreted.
Well, I mean, if I ever achieve that, I hope that the entire world will know.
Yes, we'll make sure to have another interview.
Because that's something that should be spread. I think it's useful.
Yes. Well, and working with teenagers, that aspect, for example, that came to mind, how do you foresee yourself coaching? Besides the sports, there are things you have added throughout our interview so far that show the importance that you know words are. So do you think you would integrate that even indirectly when you're working with teenagers?
Yeah, so my goal there would be to develop an actual relationship with them, and so that, because I can be very intuitive to how someone's, especially with emotions that I've personally had dealt with, anger and self-loathing
Yes.
and those kinds of feelings. So when I recognize that, especially with younger people, it makes me want to help them, but I want them to be comfortable enough so that we can talk about those things. But because I can see it through the sport,
Yes.
right, I can tell when I'm boxing somebody or if we're sparring or something like that, I can tell when they're just really angry and they need to get it out.
Yeah.
Because it's not a good sparring match.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? It's not
Yeah.
good. They're angry and they're lashing out.
Do you find that they're not as effective
Yes.
when they're angry? So
Extremely
anger.
Yes, it will
It
make
will
it
not
much,
make
much
you win.
easier for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not only do I see that in the movies, but with the way the brain works, if you're in fight, if you're in defense mode, you're not actually strategic or tactical.
Yes,
I think is the right word.
you're just not thinking
Yeah.
very much, and you're easy to read. I can say I would want to hide what I'm about to do, but if I'm really just angry and lashing out, I know exactly what's coming at me, and I know that they're not gonna be thinking about what I'm doing. They're only thinking about their anger.
And so with teenagers, you'd be able to read them and then support them accordingly.
Yes, and so I would recognize that, hopefully, which becomes easier with that physical aspect, right?
Yeah.
I can, especially with things like anger.
Mm-hmm.
I can calm things down and have a conversation with them, ask them what's going on, and see what I can do to help.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the times it's people either just have a plain lack of encouragement from the people in their lives, or they just don't know what to do and they don't want to speak to
The adults in
parents
their
or
house,
the
yes.
adults in their house, or because they, for whatever reason.
Or the teenagers, or their
Yes,
friends sometimes.
exactly.
So yeah, that role model.
Or their
is
friends who
important.
might be struggling with the same exact issues. They're not,
Yes.
that's not always going to be very helpful to talk to somebody who doesn't have an understanding of what you don't understand either.
Yeah. And the music we haven't touched upon too much, but did the music have an impact in your life in a way that supported you emotionally and or in any way, shape, or form throughout your...
Yes, especially early on. I've always played instruments. I think I started with violin at the age 10.
Wow.
Wonderful. And then I moved schools that didn't have an orchestra, so I moved on to clarinet and saxophone, and I've always played music.
Okay.
But it was a way for me to do something. I could play music. Usually I was by myself. And because I always felt like I couldn't show emotions, I couldn't show these things. I was feeling sad
you're a man,
or anything.
so.
I was a man's man. So I would do these things by myself, but the music was a way for me to let that out and feel them, and it just in the same way as hitting a punching bag releases that anger that I was bottling up, all that sadness and or love or joy, or I had a crush on a girl and I wanted to show it, so I would be able to do these things with music, and I could let it out there, and it would the same effect, like after hitting that bag, and I would feel relieved. I'm at peace now. It was the same thing with music, just on for different emotions, basically.
You and I talk a lot about energy, the Schumann resonance, the hertz. You've been testing out the hertz. I've mentioned that a couple times on the podcast, when you told me about you switching the guitar strings to 528 and how you felt it on your body. As you know, I do Reiki. You've had a session. So that energy aspect, I would say, is emotion, energy in motion, which is why it's beautiful what you share. I've played the trumpet before, but music, boxing, they all, I would say, allow us to feel our body, and there's different things to be expressed for you, especially holding it in. I can see how that would help. And I was just wondering, do you think you'll integrate music, Tai Chi, and boxing at some point, or do you think one aspect or one element is more important than the other? I'm just curious.
Certainly don't think one's more important than the other. I think they may have differences and that can be explored.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say one's better or nothing. I'm not sure how I would incorporate music into that, but I have actually thought about that, and how, like, while I'm boxing or just training and working out, how different frequencies or in different styles of music could affect
in the background
how I perform, or maybe my state of mind. So I noticed, like, if I do play music a lot when I'm training, right? So I usually, it ends up being almost more folksy kind of music, which sounds almost counterproductive for punching things. But if I put on death metal or something like that, I find that I just become more angry and unthinking, or so.
Well, and that's the notes that you gave me, though, right? It causes more anger, those notes. Am I correct? Yeah.
They're the notes that they're using and the keys that they're using them in. It will have an effect.
That's fascinating. So the folks helps you to be better.
Yeah.
Folksy music. And so
lighter music, C major, which is a very happy, it's like a childish innocence kind of happiness and joy. That I find actually puts me in the best state of mind for boxing, and it sounds so counterproductive, so it's interesting.
C major, childish and joy.
Yes.
Well, of course, being a child is light. You're lighthearted. You can be your honest, true self. Well, let's call it how it is, but you have no fear about showing who you are. So it makes sense to me. Your full expression, and being able, therefore, to be fluid with your action, that oneness in the moment of boxing.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating. So I'm wondering if you have anything you'd like to talk specifically about before we close today's episode. I think we covered a good portion of stuff.
No, I think it was a very excellent conversation.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Okay, well, we will be back at some point with Jeremiah, and in the meantime, we want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.